Welcome to the Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Now, the Modern Taoist.
Well, hello, and welcome to another edition, another episode, another occurrence of the Modern Taoist podcast. My name is Kit Man, and I hope you are having a good holiday. If you are listening to this during the holiday season in 2025 is how we are recording this, and we've got New Year's coming up here in just 3 days from my record date, just a couple of days from when this episode will be available to you. And today we're going to talk a little bit about New Year's and new beginnings, and specifically I want to talk about New Year's resolutions, and we're going to get into that here in just a few minutes. Before we do that, I want to just take a personal moment here to thank you guys as we end the 2025 year. That will be the year that we began this podcast. And again, I stopped counting the episodes. I think this is 20 or 21 or whatever it is. But that's how many weeks we have done this to this point. And we certainly have no plans to stop anytime soon. And all of the great comments and emails and stuff, just if I don't get a chance to respond to all of them, please know that they are all read. There is time for me usually to respond to them. Sometimes on Saturday or Sunday mornings, I'll sit down and respond to as many as I can. If I don't respond to you, though, it doesn't mean that, I hate you or anything. It just means that I just didn't get a chance to respond for whatever. You may get a response like weeks after you send it. I try to, whenever I get, a moment to jump into the flow of reading comments and stuff, that's when I usually do that. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks. But again, they are all read and they are all appreciated. And your nice comments about the theme tends to be about how we are making it easier for you to understand Taoism. And that is the kind of the whole point of this. Because as I had a teacher that was very blunt and straightforward, and asked me how many different times did he ask me if I had a brain in my head. So I learned a lot from not learning. I learned a lot from but what I mean by that is a good Taoist teacher is simply opening doors, right? We're simply putting a map in your hands. We're not driving the car for you. Okay. And I always wanted to make sure that whenever I taught somebody about it, I taught them in a way that made it empowering for them to come to realizations, not by memorizing rote, scripture from the Tao Te Ching or something like that. I've had a couple of different offers from other podcasts to be a guest on their show or whatever, and I certainly will do that if anybody wants me to, or if you'd like me to speak at your workplace about leadership or something. I'm certainly open to doing all of that. But what I don't want to do is get into a back and forth about scripture, about reading and deciphering the Tao Te Ching, as opposed to reading and deciphering, what Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John had to say in the Bible. It's just, I love answering the questions on the podcast about when people are confused about the Tao Te Ching. I love that because that's my whole goal, is to make things less confusing. But getting into a back and forth about with another so-called expert on what Lao Tzu actually meant or what he was saying, that's not something arguing, as I said before, arguing about the Tao is, that's like dancing about architecture. It just doesn't make any sense. So let's talk, though, about today's actual topic. And, every year when the calendar flips, we feel a weird pressure, right? New year, new goals, new promises, new memes that say, new year, new you. Somewhere along the way, January became some kind of a really bizarre moral checkpoint. A time when people feel obligated to declare how horrible they are, publicly declare that they're going to change, and prove that they are serious this time. Taoism kind of looks at that little ritual with some quiet suspicion, right? Because from a Taoist perspective, New Year's resolutions aren't wrong, they're just misunderstood. Because this implies an assumption that change happens because you've decided it will. Because your mind makes a declaration that if you decide hard enough, and if you decide early enough, everything else will just magically fall into line. But that's not how it works, right? Taoism has always taught the opposite of that. Change doesn't begin with force. What does it begin with? As we've said dozens of times on this show, alignment. Change happens when you get in alignment with the flow of life and stop fighting against. Tao Te Ching never talks about improvement in dramatic terms. It talks about returning, about noticing. Notice where things are out of balance and allowing them to settle into balance. When you make a resolution under this pressure of New Year's or the new year, you're often reacting to a discomfort that you have, or a guilt, or a comparison. Okay? You're not responding to readiness. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Like, you're responding to discomfort, guilt, or comparison. It doesn't matter if you're ready or not. You're trying to force something into readiness. And the difference in what you're responding to matters more than any motivation ever will. January is a very, very loud month. My birthday is in January. And I bring that up because my birthday has always carried a weird pressure. Now, it's nothing I can even really explain. But January is very loud. The gyms fill up. Social media turns into accountability boards. Productivity language spikes. And none of that means that any change is actually happening. It usually means strain has been temporarily disguised as discipline. I want you to think about that sentence for a minute. I want you to pay attention to what I just said. People are pretending to be disciplined and instead are straining themselves. And Taoism would say that strain always reveals itself eventually. And when it does, people then flip. And that strain that they thought was discipline, that the strain breaks them, and they assume that they lack willpower. Right? When you fail at a New Year's resolution, you carry around this internal, why do I keep doing this to myself? This internal guilt. And it's not because you lack willpower. It's because you're trying to move against your own rhythm. Now, look, we're not asking you or cajoling you into abandoning intention. That we don't want that. But you have to respect the timing. Winter, let's look at nature, right? Winter is not a season of expansion. Winter is not the time in the rhythm for expansion. It is a season of storage. It is a season of quiet recalibration. Forcing major change during a time that is meant for consolidation is going to create a resistance inside your body and your mind that you don't even really know why it's happening. And that resistance shows up as burnout or avoidance or, more often than anything, self-criticism. And the deeper tissue feels that, right? Because nature flows in a specific cycle, and we are part of that nature. So trying to force expansion during the winter months, which are a season of contemplation and recalibration, is going against the rhythm. The big issue with resolutions is not the failure. It's, believe it or not, it's violence. And you're probably thinking, what in the world is Kit talking about? Not physical violence, self-directed violence against your own soul. Pressure that you have invented. All pressure is violent. Maybe not physically violent, but all pressure by nature is violent. Promising that you will be different often comes with contempt for who you are now. And that is violence against your soul. You're telling yourself that you are lesser by promising that you will be better later. We don't work in later, we work in right now, today. Promising that you will be different later on. The Tao does not work that way. Don't shame the present in order to worship the future. It starts by seeing clearly where you are in the moment, what is already happening. So as we begin today, sit with this question. As you listen to the rest of this podcast, I want you to sit with one question. Are your resolutions an expression of alignment or a reaction to pressure? Taoism does not reject goals, not by any stretch. It does question urgency. One of the first things a Taoist lens is going to notice about New Year's resolutions is how rushed they feel. The calendar changes and suddenly everything must change with it. Your body, your habits, your identities, even relationships are expected to pivot on command, on command. It's now January 1st. Everything's got to change right now. When human beings ignore the fact that they are cyclical, that's when we get into trouble. In nature, nothing resists. It flows. And nothing resets simply because a date arrives. Rivers don't speed up because it's January. When springtime arrives, trees don't just suddenly bloom on the first day of spring. They don't force growth just because a calendar that a human being made up thousands of years ago has changed. Change follows conditions, not announcements. And we ignore this and try to impose change by declaration. What we're doing then is we've got resistance building quietly underneath the effort. Because most of our resolutions are born from discomfort. You look back at the year and you feel regret or disappointment or comparison, and that emotional charge gets mistaken for clarity. You think you've now become clear by saying, I'm going to fix this now. Taoism would say that reacting to discomfort is not the same as responding to imbalance. Reaction is sharp and impatient. Response is measured and observant. And that's why so many resolutions burn hot and disappear fast. They're powered by emotion, not by rhythm. Motivation spikes, systems are overhauled, and life gets rigid overnight. And then something interrupts. Usually, it's fatigue or stress. And you miss a day here, and you miss a day there, and you don't go to the gym, and you snap at somebody that you didn't mean to snap at, and suddenly the structure collapses because it was never integrated into your real life to begin with. Taoism wants to approach change by watching patterns before trying to alter them. Like, how do you actually eat when you're tired? How do you move when you're stressed? How do you behave when no one is watching? These are not failures to be corrected. They're data. Data for you to use. But without seeing them clearly, any attempt to change that becomes fantasy. You can say, I want to lose 25 pounds this year. There's nothing wrong with that. But expecting it to happen because you've decided it's going to happen, you have to find the root of why you are 25 pounds overweight to begin with, if that's where you're at in your life. Taoism wants you to find these patterns before you try to alter. Another Taoist concern with resolutions is the fact that they moralize behavior. Success is a virtue suddenly. Failure, therefore, is a weakness. And then this framing creates not growth, but self-judgment, violent pressure against one's self. Taoism does not improve through punishment. It improves through understanding. When you understand why a pattern exists, force becomes unnecessary. This does not mean drifting and doing nothing. Remember, we've said before, Taoism is not passive like people believe. It simply insists that effort needs to match reality. Small, steady adjustments made in the right direction have way more power than dramatic overhauls that can't be sustained. One walk added to your week, one meal changed, one boundary clarified. Find a boundary, clarify that boundary. These are movements that respect timing. The irony here is that when people stop forcing change, they often change more. Because when pressure lifts, curiosity returns. When you start discovering patterns, you become naturally curious on how to fix them. And when curiosity is there, experimentation becomes possible. And there's your opening through which Taoism works. It creates conditions where change can then root itself instead of constantly restarting. New Year's resolutions feel urgent because people are trying to outrun their own discomfort. Taoism says, whoa, slow down. Slow down enough to learn from it. Learn from your discomfort. What is the root of the discomfort? It's not because you weigh 35 pounds more than you think you should. That's not the root of the discomfort. The discomfort is far, far, far deeper. Find that root. Because declaring that you're going to lose 35 pounds is not going to make you lose 35 pounds. You can work out until you pass out, and it's not going to change anything. Until you change the imbalance in your life, sometimes imbalances, all of this other stuff is just surface hooey. That's official Taoist talk there, surface hooey. We got to pause on the uncomfortable question, right? We always ask. You've got to become uncomfortable, and the uncomfortable question is why? Why this change? Why now? And who is actually pushing the why? New Year's resolutions don't come from clarity, as we just said. They come from pressure. The calendar turns, and suddenly staying the same feels like a moral failure. Not because anything actually broke overnight, but because we've been taught that January 1st is a checkpoint. Why are we such a miserable human being? Why are we so awful? Why are we so fat? It's January 1st, and we must change. You hear how silly that sounds? That pressure feels internal, but usually it's not. It's absorbed. It's absorbed from culture, from comparison, from watching other people announce these transformations, and mistaking visibility for truth. Taoism would say this is borrowed urgency. And borrowed urgency always distorts. Always. Let me tell you, nothing meaningful about you changed because the calendar changed. Your body didn't reset. Your habits didn't disappear. Your life didn't suddenly offer new conditions, but the story around you shifted. And stories have weight. So they quietly tell you what you should want, what you should fix, and how fast you should do it. And that's force. When people don't trust timing, they use pressure. When they don't trust themselves, they apply pressure. Resolutions often sound like self-discipline, but if you listen close, you'll hear self-aggression. Crack down. Get serious. Stop being lazy. Fix it now. That's not commitment. That's fear wearing a productivity costume. Taoism doesn't treat force as strength. It treats it as information, as data. Force shows up when something is what? Out of alignment. Either the change is wrong, or the reason is wrong, or the moment is wrong. Force is what happens when movement doesn't match reality. So you try to overpower reality instead. Look at how people talk about the habits that they want to change. They speak as if the habit is the enemy. Something stupid, something weak, something embarrassing. Taoism takes a much different view. If a habit exists, it's doing something for you. It's either regulating your stress or creating relief or providing escape or giving structure. And until you understand the function of why that habit exists, you can't remove it by force. You just can't. That's why resolutions don't actually change behavior. They change the story that people tell about themselves for a few weeks or a couple of months. They say, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And they get on and they post their Instagram pictures of a new year, new me, and I'm working on it. And those pictures last, most of January and part of February. But by March, those pictures are gone. There's no more of that. There's no more new year, new me. because that declaration only temporarily quieted the inner critic. That resolution became reassurance, but that's not transformation. Taoism isn't interested in reassurance. It's interested in balance. So does this change make your life more workable? Does it reduce friction instead of adding to it? Does it fit the season that you're in? Winter matters here. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably already have some understanding of seasonal cycles, right? Winter matters here. Taoism has always respected that. Winter is not a time for growth. It's a time for storage, consolidation, relaxation. And when you demand growth during a season that's meant for rest, your body is going to resist. It just is. You are nature. You are nature. That if Taoism, if you could put Taoism into one simple sentence, you are nature. Stop pretending you're not an animal. You are an animal. You're an intelligent one, most of us. You have, opposable thumbs and whatnot. We have tools, but we are still a natural being on this planet, and we are still governed by cycles. This is where people get confused. They feel resistance and they assume that they lack discipline. In reality, they're pushing against timing. They're forcing movement before the ground is ready. No amount of motivation will ever fix that. Taoism doesn't slow things down to kill ambition. It slows things down to clean intention. When you remove comparison, borrowed urgency, and self-punishment, what's left is quiet. What's left is specificity. What's left is something far more grounded. Resolutions disappear because they were never yours to begin with. One adjustment is all you need instead of a total reinvention. One honest shift instead of a total reset. That's how Taoism approaches change, not by asking how hard you can push, but by whether you're moving with the grain or moving against the grain. When the reason for change is clear, there is no force required. Movement happens with less noise, less personal violence, less self-betrayal. And that is the difference between reacting to the calendar and responding to the imbalance. One, you're exhausted by March. The other quietly reshapes your entire year. So that when next January 1st rolls around, you have no need to make a declaration. One of the deeper problems with New Year's resolutions, and one we probably should talk about, is that the fact that resolutions treat change like an identity upgrade, as if you're not good enough already. You decide who you want to be, you announce it, and then you try to live up to that. Well, that's never going to work, right? Think about how that sounds. That's never going to work. Taoism doesn't work from the identity forward. It works from behavior and conditions outward. It doesn't ask who you want to become. It helps you figure out who you actually already are, how you are living day to day, and whether that way of living is sustainable. Resolutions sound like this: I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to be more focused. And those statements feel strong, but they're vague. What does that mean? What does disciplined mean? What does healthier mean? What does more focused mean? Those are vague declarations. And then they place pressure on your identity instead of paying attention to the process. Identity is downstream. It forms slowly. Identity is formed almost accidentally. from repeated action in the same direction. When you aim at identity first, you're creating a standard that you are constantly failing to meet. Taoism is far more interested in orientation than aspiration. Aspiration imagines this future perfect self. And then you have this vision of this future perfect self, so you try to close that gap aggressively. Orientation simply asks, maybe you're just facing the wrong direction. Are your daily actions generally moving toward balance or away from it? Direction matters more than speed. You can move slowly in the right direction and arrive far faster than people that are sprinting in the wrong direction. You understand? This is where the idea of a clean slate completely falls apart. New Year's resolutions love this fantasy of a clean slate, of starting over, as if last year can be completely cut off cleanly and forgotten that it ever happened. Meh. Sorry, that doesn't work. Taoism doesn't believe in resets. It believes in continuity. Whatever you're stepping into this year grew directly out of the rhythms that you've been living in. So ignoring those rhythms doesn't free you. It blinds you to why you've gotten to where you are in the first place. Habits don't exist in isolation, right? They're braided into you. They're braided into your sleep and your stress and your workload and your relationships and your environment. When someone says they want to change a habit, well, holy cow, like, look at the surrounding pattern first. Not to complicate things, but to make that change possible. If the structure stays the same, behavior usually returns to form no matter how strong your intention is. Another place resolutions fail is in their relationship with mistakes. You know what I'm saying? One missed day is a verdict. One disruption turns into total collapse. How many times have you decided pick something. I'm going to stop drinking. And you go, 2 months without a beer. And then you're out with your friends and your friends say, oh, come on, just have one. And you go, oh, come on, just have one. Okay. You had one beer. Who cares? But then that turns into, well, I had one yesterday, so it's over. I failed. I'll just have 7 today. I was on a very, very good diet. And my friend had a birthday party and I had a piece of cake. So it's over. I might as well eat a pack of Twinkies. Right? Because a mistake becomes a failure. You're operating in binary. Taoism doesn't operate in binaries. It operates in return. You drift. You had a piece of cake. Notice it. And then return to what you were doing. Return to the good habit. That's not failure. That literally is Taoism in practice. Screw up. Notice it. Go back. Right? That's Taoism right there. It's the yin yang, guys. Screw up. Notice it. Go back. It's okay. That's why Taoism favors small, repeatable adjustments. 10 minutes done most days outperforms an hour that you only do once a week. One boundary held consistently reshapes a relationship more than a long speech about communication. Rhythm outlasts intensity every time. And there's also this quiet cruelty that's baked into a lot of resolutions. The idea that suffering proves how sincere you are, that if change doesn't hurt, it doesn't count. Taoism rejects this completely. Strain is not an evidence of virtue. Usually it's an evidence of misalignment. When effort feels heavy, it's worth questioning. When the change fits the life you're actually living, it's easier. Taoism doesn't ask you to become someone else. It asks you to stop working against yourself, to adjust to what's already happening instead of declaring war on it. And that adjustment is probably going to be modest. It's probably going to look pretty unimpressive from the outside. But you shouldn't worry about that outside stuff, right? These adjustments happen internally in how kind you are to yourself, how quickly you can recognize why the imbalance is occurring. And when change comes from orientation rather than aspiration, something stabilizes. You stop questioning and negotiating your self-worth with every action. You stop turning progress into proof and setbacks into shame. You move, you pause, you notice, you correct the course, and you return to the path. That's the kind of change I trust. That's the kind of change Taoist trusts. Not with big announcements at the beginning of the year, but the kind of change that is still quietly shaping your life long after the calendar stops paying attention to you. Refuse to treat change as an event. Nothing changes because you declare it once a year. Change happens because of what you do repeatedly and quietly without ceremony. Resolutions feel powerful. I get that because they compress hope into a singular moment. You've drawn the line. You've drawn the line in the sand. You've announced your intentions, and you feel very briefly powerful. You feel briefly organized. You've bought yourself a workout diary, and you've written down all the exercises, and you've put days at the top, and you're not going to miss any of them. So you feel this sense of very brief, I know what I'm doing. But Taoism is not interested in the moments that only seem like clarity if they can't survive your ordinary life. Taoism wants to know what you do on a random weekday when nothing feels inspiring, when no one is watching, when you don't have social media. That's where real change lives, in repetition. But this is also where it unravels, because most people feel, whether they are or not, they feel like they're being watched and measured and judged. And they imagine this invisible audience tracking whether they follow through. But that audience doesn't care. They don't exist. No one's paying attention to the way you live in the way you think that they are. People are not invested in you. I promise. Even your close family is not invested in your habits, your discipline, your personal evolution. They're busy with their own train wreck. And that realization can feel a bit deflating at first. Look, I'm not saying they don't support you, but at the end of the day, they don't wake up in the morning wondering if you're sticking to your resolutions. But don't let that be deflating. Let it be a relief. Because when you realize that no one cares, performance loses its grip. You know what they do care about? That you're happy. That you are safe. That you're healthy. They don't care about the declarations. They care about you. You don't need to justify setbacks. You don't need to turn change into a public identity. You're free to focus on what actually works. And what actually works is small, incremental rebalances. Get to the root. If you're 35 pounds overweight, why are you? I am going to tell you right now, as someone who has owned gyms, who has been a martial artist, I was a boxer and a fighter, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not because you're not on the treadmill 45 minutes a day. That is not why you're overweight. Okay? Your changes you want to make are not because of something huge. They are for multiple little things that have piled up and gotten you out of balance. And that daily process starts small. Ask yourself practical questions. How did you sleep last night? How do you eat when you're rushed? How did you respond when you were irritated? These are honest questions. They're not heroic, right? Taoism values this honesty because this honesty will reveal to you the leverage you need to get back into balance. Once a year resolutions fail because you're trying to fix everything at once. Body, mind, productivity, relationships. Daily processes want you to do the opposite. Narrow the field. Choose one or two areas. Work with them patiently, not aggressively, patiently. And this patience is where most people get uncomfortable because it feels slow. It doesn't feel heroic. It lacks momentum. There's no emotional surge to ride. Taoism is not going to help you because there's no hype in Taoism, right? It's not going to help you with big declarations. It's going to help you understand balance. Trust accumulation. Positive accumulation needs to balance out the negative accumulation, right? You got to where you are in a position you feel like you need to change because of a bunch of little small negative things that accumulated over time, not because of one giant thing that happened, usually. I'm not talking about a massive injury or something like that. Little things have accumulated over time, right? So it's going to take accumulation to bring things back into balance. So let go of the idea that anyone is keeping score. Nobody's grading you. Nobody is monitoring your follow-through. That pressure is always self-imposed. And when that drops away, what remains is a choice. Quiet, ordinary, moment-by-moment choices. What am I doing right now? You are either working towards balance or working against balance. Every single decision, every single choice is either a choice that moves you forward into balance or moves you backward into imbalance. There is no standing still. Change that lasts rarely announces itself. It accumulates slowly, invisibly, through repetition. And nobody applauds repetition. No one gives you kudos. Rhythm is what we're looking for. Rhythm doesn't care what day the calendar says. So, how do we do this? First, replace your goals with an orientation. A goal is a fixed outcome. An orientation is a direction. Okay? Instead of saying, I will become disciplined, ask, what direction am I facing? Am I heading towards balance or away? Towards rest or towards exhaustion? Towards clarity or towards noise? Orientation can be checked moment by moment. Goals can't because they're way out in the future. Second thing, work with subtraction before addition. Most people approach change by adding something, adding effort, adding new habits, new rules, new pressure. Taoism says, no, hang on. Let's remove the friction. What is draining your energy unnecessarily? What is cluttering your attention? What is being done out of habit rather than out of usefulness? So before adding a bunch of stuff, try removing some stuff first. Fewer inputs create more change than more effort. Third, build a small practice that can survive the bad days. Right? Taoism doesn't trust practices that only work when life is calm. Choose something modest enough that you can do on your worst day, a short walk, 5 minutes of breathing, writing a single sentence in a journal, standing outside for a moment before starting your day. Make a small practice. 4, create return as a success. You're going to drift. That's not a flaw. You're a human being. You're a good person. Don't worry about that. Taoism expects drift. The work is not staying perfectly aligned. The work is noticing and then returning without punishing yourself. When you miss a day, don't reset the whole system out of shame. Just go back the next day. Do it again. Don't let a piece of cake turn into a box of Twinkies. If you're trying to fix your, maybe you feel like you're too angry at people at work. Okay, don't let one little snap turn into a tirade. Notice it, reset, and return to the flow. And match your effort to the season. Some seasons are for expansion, others are for consolidation. Winter is not the time to demand maximum output. That's in the spring. If you push every season like it's supposed to be spring, you're going to burn out. Spring is where change happens. Spring is maximum output. Okay? Adjust that intensity. That's how momentum survives the year. Number 6, let the behavior teach you, not the other way around. Let behavior teach you belief. Most people try to think their way into change. Act first and let understanding catch up later. No. You don't need to believe you're a disciplined person to act with discipline today. You just need to act with discipline. Act with discipline today, and you become a disciplined person through repetition. Repeated action reshapes belief far more reliably than belief reshapes action. Number 7, reduce the commentary on yourself. One of the most un-Taoist things you can do is constant self-narration, judging, evaluating, keeping score. Notice what you do, notice how it feels, and adjust if you need to, but drop the running story about what it all means. Too much commentary turns every action into a verdict. Stop the internal violence against yourself. Number 8, instead of trying to improve everything, just choose one anchor point. Morning, evening, one transition in the day where you do something the same way every day. It could be a walk, could be a cup of tea, could be just a moment where you sit still. A brief anchor creates rhythm. Number 9, stop asking whether something is working and ask whether it's something you can live with. Most people abandon practices because they don't see immediate results. Taoism asks a different question. Can you live with this without resentment, without constant negotiation? If the answer is no, stop doing it. Figure out something else. Sustainable change always feels slightly underwhelming at first. That's okay. And finally, trust accumulation over breakthrough. Taoism is not promising transformation moments, but it does promise gradual realignment. Small actions done repeatedly will change everything. They'll change your posture, your mood, your health, and clarity. Notice it happening, but notice it a moment at a time. not in a big picture. You'll one day wake up and go, wow, it all changed. Because something that used to feel difficult will now feel natural. New Year's resolutions promise us clarity through declaration. Taoism offers something quieter and more honest. Stop making dramatic promises to a future version of yourself and start paying attention to how you live right now, to who you are right now. Change doesn't need a deadline. It doesn't need a public commitment. It doesn't need pressure to justify itself. It needs conditions that make it possible, and a rhythm that you can return to when life pulls you off course. Intensity does not equal sincerity. You don't prove commitment by how hard you push in January. You prove it by how gently and consistently you adjust when no one is watching. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You don't need to punish last year's version of you. You don't need to perform change for an audience that doesn't care. What you need is simpler, but also harder. You need a direction that you can recognize, a few practices that survive day to day, and the patience to let the repetition do the work. Don't lower your standards. Just stop confusing pressure with progress. When effort matches reality, change doesn't feel like a fight. Match your reality. So as the year unfolds, forget about the resolutions. Watch the rhythm. Notice what is easy to return to. Adjust if you have to, and let the work be quiet enough to last. That's going to do it for today. Thank you so much. I hope this helped you in some way. Follow, please subscribe. Please, can you follow and subscribe? I've been told I don't ask that enough. If you can, you're contributing to the conversation. Just the follow, just the subscribe. If you'd like to make a comment, go to daoananda.org. That's DAOANANDA.org. Also, Tao is not spelled either way. You can spell it DAO or TAO. We spell it both ways. It doesn't matter. Okay. You can find more writing and reflections there as well. And, send me a note. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining along. Happy New Year to you and yours. And, little incrementals. Little incrementals. And I will talk to you in 2026. Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Visit us online at daoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Please like or subscribe on this platform, and thanks again.